Imagine standing in the center of a vast stone arena, surrounded by 500 of your fellow citizens. Their faces are not filled with the warmth of neighbors, but with the cold heat of judgment. You are 70 years old. You have spent your entire life walking the streets of this city barefoot and penniless, talking to anyone who would listen about the nature of virtue, justice, and the soul. And now that same city has brought you here to tell you one thing: quiet your tongue, admit you are wrong, or prepare to die. This was the scene in Athens in the year 399 BC. The man standing in the center was Socrates. He was not a general, a politician, or a wealthy merchant. He was a stonecutter's son who had become the gadfly of Athens. He didn't claim to have the answers. He only claimed to have the questions. Yet, those questions had become so dangerous to the status quo that the democracy he loved had turned into a mob determined to silence him. But Socrates understood a secret about freedom that his accusers could never grasp: that the only true prison is a compromised soul. The charges against him were vague: corrupting the youth and failing to acknowledge the gods of the city. But the real conflict was deeper. Socrates had made a habit of stopping powerful men in the marketplace and asking them to define things like courage or piety. When they couldn't, he exposed their ignorance. He didn't do this out of malice, but out of a desperate love for the truth. He believed that the unexamined life is not worth living. To Socrates, to live without questioning was not to live at all. It was merely to exist as a biological machine. As he stood before the jury, Socrates had every opportunity to save himself. In ancient Athens, a defendant could easily plea for mercy, bring their weeping children into the court to evoke pity, or even suggest a light fine. His friends had already arranged a way for him to escape the city and live out his days in exile. But Socrates refused to play the game. He didn't see the trial as a threat to his life. He saw it as the final test of his integrity. If he backed down now, everything he had taught for 40 years would be a lie. He realized that mastery over oneself means being willing to lose everything for the sake of what is right. Instead of begging, Socrates spoke with a chilling, beautiful tranquility. He told the jury that he was actually a gift to the city, sent by the gods to keep Athens from falling into a spiritual sleep. When asked what punishment he thought he deserved, he boldly suggested that the city should provide him with free meals for life, just like they did for Olympic champions. This wasn't arrogance. It was a radical conviction. He was teaching them, even at the edge of the grave, that the truth is more valuable than safety. When the verdict of death was finally delivered, Socrates did not flinch. He looked at the men who had just sentenced him and told them that they were the ones who were truly losing. They were killing a man, but they were wounding their own souls by committing an injustice. This is the ultimate reversal in the story. We usually think of the prisoner as the one who is trapped. But Socrates showed us that the prisoner is free if his conscience is clear, while the judges are enslaved by their own fear and malice. In his final hours, surrounded by his weeping disciples in a small stone cell, Socrates remained the calmest person in the room. He spoke about the immortality of the soul and the nature of the divine. When the executioner brought the cup of hemlock, a poison that would slowly paralyze his body, Socrates took it with a steady hand. He didn't curse his enemies. He didn't lament his fate. He offered a prayer and drank. His last words were a request to pay a small debt he owed to a neighbor. Even at the threshold of death, he was concerned with justice in its smallest forms. Why does this story, from over 2,000 years ago, still pierce our hearts today? Because we all live in our own versions of Athens. We all face the pressure to conform, to stay silent when we see injustice, and to trade our values for security. We often feel like victims of our boss, our society, or our fears. But Socrates tells us that no one can hurt you unless you allow them to hurt your character. He practiced a form of stoicism long before the word existed, the belief that our internal state is the only thing we truly own. Choosing truth over life is not an act of martyrdom for the sake of death. It is the ultimate affirmation of life. It is the realization that a life spent in silence and deception is a living death. When you stand up for what you believe in, when you refuse to lie to yourself just to fit in, you are exercising the last human freedom. You are taking control of your destiny in a way that no external power can take away. Today, you might not be facing a cup of hemlock, but you are facing choices. You are facing the temptation to be compliant instead of authentic. When you feel that pressure, remember the old man in the Athenian cell. Remember that your integrity is your greatest asset. The world can take your money, your reputation, and even your health, but it cannot take your virtue unless you hand it over. Take a deep breath. Look at the truths you have been avoiding. Find the courage to ask the hard questions of yourself. Understand that being healed often starts with being honest. You are not a pawn of the world's judgment. You are a free soul capable of choosing the light even when the darkness is closing in. Like Socrates, find the silence within the storm and let your truth be your shield.